Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Cormorant Productions, here to talk about Season 5, Episode 10, I've Got This. Reading through the forums and the Facebook groups, it seems like this is an episode that is split down the middle for people who like and dislike it. I personally found it very satisfying, with a ton of great performances in little moments. Before going any further, I will tell you guys that, as usual, this is not a spoiler-free video, so if you have not yet watched the episode, I highly recommend you do so before watching my video. And secondly, if you are a fan of my channel and like this video in general, please subscribe to my channel. We open up on a montage of the various new parents, Toby and Kate, Kevin, Madison, and Rebecca and Jack, in the past timeline. And this montage is really the truth of new parenthood. It shows how tiring it can be and how rewarding it is at the same time. The cold open is a little bit more than 3 minutes, which is more like the usual cold open of a television series, as opposed to the 10-minute cold opens that This Is Us usually does, or sometimes does, I should say. I kind of feel like that this should have been the max of Jack and Rebecca's appearances this week, or at least Rebecca's appearance in the past timeline. The rest of the story does not really amount to much. It does sort of tie in to the whole financial themes of this episode, but I kind of feel like it could have been cut from this show with no impact whatsoever to the overall story that they were trying to tell. It is nice to see Miguel and Jack together again, but that's about all I can really say about that story. This really goes into the category of an unnecessary Jack appearance. When we come back, Randall is hanging out in a den-like area, or on the porch or something. He's got a sweet setup with a table and a laptop, and I see a grill behind him and a coffee maker. And Beth eventually points out that he even has a heater on that porch, or den, or whatever the heck this is. Beth comes out to chastise Randall, saying that he cannot hide out there forever. As it turns out, Beth's mom was watching the kids while they were away, and she hasn't left yet since they came back. And by the way, it's good to know that Randall actually made it home, because he was literally traveling home for like 3 episodes. This episode really belongs to Beth, played by Susan Watson, and Toby, played by Chris Sullivan. Both stories in the main timeline build to little meltdowns at their respective dinners. Randall claims that he is not hiding, he is just enjoying the view, which, Beth points out, is just a fence. Randall says he is grateful that Beth's mom looked after the kids, but pretty much says that he would like her to go now. When she's around, things at home between the two of them, Beth and her mother, are pretty tense. And quite honestly, if I were in Randall's shoes, I would pretty much be doing exactly the same thing. Finding some place to hide. Beth mentions the fact that her mother follows her around with a Swiffer, and she says, "I know how to keep a home, Randall." And Randall agrees, and it is very wise that Randall agrees. At dinner, Beth's mom will often look at her like she raised a pack of wolves. And she says, "Thank God she is leaving tomorrow." Beth's mom wants to have a big dinner before she goes home, and Beth wants to pull out all the stops just to prove that she can. And Randall points out there is nothing better than a meal that is to prove something. Beth's mom is played by Felicia Rashad of The Cosby Show fame, which is a show that unfortunately has been tainted by Bill Cosby's later life, which is really all I'm going to say about that. I most recently saw her in the 2 Creed movies, which are movies a part of the Rocky franchise. This is her 3rd appearance of the series, and I wasn't exactly looking forward to seeing her again, because like Randall, I kind of feel like the interactions between Beth and her mother are a little bit unbearable to watch at times. But here I thought her appearance was pretty great overall. And judging from how this episode ends, we're going to get a lot more of her. Beth convinces Randall to come in from the porch, and inside they go, where Beth tries to corral the various children into doing what she wants them to do. Tess is on her phone, Annie and Deja are fighting over the remote, and by the way, this is the most substantial part that Deja has gotten pretty much the entire season. And I rather liked her little subplot in this episode. The kids are all basically whatevering their mother, but then Beth's mom comes in and straightens them all out, and they instantly respond to her. Much to Beth's annoyance. Randall responds to this by asking, "Hey, what time is your train leaving?" And Beth's mom is like, "Are you trying to get rid of me, Randall?" And Randall says, No, of course not." And Beth's mom says, "Well, that's good, because I decided to delay my trip a week, so I can help you guys out." And they're thinking, oh joy. Cut to Madison, who is sitting on the couch, watching TV with some kind of pillow thing. Kevin enters the door and Madison says, "Hey, look at you, person who showered." And yes, I can say that is a very high achievement. Kevin did that and found time to get something for Madison, which turns out to be a dress for a dinner that Kevin wants to throw, inviting Kate, Toby, and the kids over for dinner. He asks what Madison says about that, and Madison asks, "Can I have half a glass of wine?" Kevin agrees, and so does Madison. We cut to Kate, who is taking Jack, I believe, and this is like the first time we've actually seen him all season long. They are coming from Jack's music class, and Kate is accepting Kevin's invite. They run into a doctor of theirs, and she mentions that they miss Kate volunteering. But, Kate's pretty busy with 2 babies to take care and all. And before she runs into this doctor, she mentions over the phone that having dinner with the family might give her a reason to shower during the course of this week. And I'm not sure why this is the second time that we're making that joke in this episode, but it's interesting. We cut to Toby, who's having an interview online. He's got a suit, or at the very least, a tie, a dress jacket, and a dress shirt, with no pants. He has blinds to cover his background, and he's taking care of the baby. Now, why isn't Kate taking care of the baby during Toby's interview? Isn't it possible to have scheduled this at a slightly more convenient time so that Kate can watch the baby, so he doesn't have to take care of her in the middle of an interview? But maybe this is just how the corona world swings, I guess. Toby doesn't think the interview goes very well, but the guy online says that he is their top candidate. Skipping Jack's scenes, we once again arrive at a Toby and Kate scene on their way to dinner with Kevin and Madison. Kevin is nervous because he hasn't heard anything from his prospective employers for a job that Toby thinks he definitely has, but also is a little bit nervous that that's not going to end up being the case. And Kate tells him that she should be excited, or he should be excited, and should allow himself to be about his new upcoming job. Cut to Beth, who's telling her mom that she wanted to make something special for her last dinner. But, just so she can plan, how many dinners is Beth's mom expecting to stay for? And her mom says she isn't sure, and then tells her not to put too many peppers in the food, because not everybody can handle the heat. And Beth, under her breath, says, "I can handle the heat." Tess comes down the stairs, and Beth asks her to help her prepare the table. But Tess says that she's going to go over Alex's house, and Beth says, "Not tonight. They are going to have a family dinner, and she can go over to her house at a later day. And Tess says, "How many times do I have to tell you? It's not her. It's there." Beth stands corrected and says that she has to get used to using a plural pronoun in a different way. And Beth's mom says, using an example, that it's really not so hard if you think about it in these terms, using her mad English teacher skills. And here's something that's really interesting to me. You would figure that Beth, being of the younger generation, would have an easier time with this over her mom, who's of the older generation. You would expect Beth's mom to be like, "Oh, this is just nonsense and just not accepted at all." But she's having a way easier time of it than Beth is. The doorbell rings, Deja goes to get the door, and in comes Malik, who we haven't seen in a while. He wants to know where Randall is, and Randall is once again hiding, and he quickly goes to find him, because he needs to talk to him about something. Deja is put a little off by this, as her boyfriend just kind of completely disappears as quickly as he entered, and doesn't bring Deja with him. Malik comes out onto the porch and is impressed by Randall's setup. And Malik says, "Hiding out, huh?" And Randall says, "I'm not hiding out. I'm just carving out a little space for myself." "Okay, Randall. Let's be real here. You're hiding out." Randall says, "There's a lot of strong, opinionated women inside. But now that you're here, we're evening out the gender scales." And Randall makes it a point to say that the basil plant that he's working with is definitely male, even though the plant has no specific gender, as Randall points out. Randall asks Malik if he's alright, if there's something on his mind. Malik is clearly nervous and says he kind of needs some advice. And Randall's all, "You're coming to me for advice? You see, that's what I'm talking about." And for the record, this is totally a Randall reaction to this if I ever saw one. He mentions that his daughters never come to him for advice. I'm sure that's not true, but whatever. He tells Malik to pull up a chair. They sit down, and Randall asks, "So what is it? School? Career? Book recommendations? Women?" And he points out, "You're dating my daughter, so it better not be women." And Malik laughs. Malik gets serious and says it's actually about Janelle. And in case Randall doesn't know, his kid. That's the name of his kid. And apparently, Jennifer, Janelle's mother, wants to come back into the picture. He knows his father is, and his mother will likely be against it, because originally, Jennifer's parents wanted to put the kid up for adoption, and they had to fight like hell to get full custody. So Malik isn't totally sure what to do. And it's fine that he's asking Randall for advice on this subject, but eventually he is going to have to talk to his parents. He isn't going to be able to hide this from them. And a word to Deja would be good too. His girlfriend, after all. Randall says that's a pretty tough thing to give advice on, and relates to his own experience, saying that not knowing his biological mother messed him up. And this seemed to convince Malik of what to do. By the way, another golden scene between Randall and Malik that we just have not gotten enough of, since we saw the pair in the earlier episodes of this season. I'm not sure I've said this before, but I like Malik, and I think he makes a great addition to this series, even in his small appearances. Cut to Madison and Kevin. Toby and Kate have arrived. They're taking selfies and meeting the babies for the first time. Toby notices all the gifts he's gotten, and he asks, jokingly, if he's opening a store. And Kevin mentions that pretty much everybody he's ever worked for has given him a gift, including one from the person who works for Leonardo DiCaprio, which turns out to be a couple of cigars, which he saved for Toby. And Toby says, if we must. And Kevin thinks they must, and he's looking forward to catching up with Toby. He wants to know everything that is going on in Toby's life. And just then, Toby receives a text message. And as it turns out, he didn't get the job after all. While Kevin is droning on in the background. Nice little bit of subtle acting from Chris Sullivan. Kevin asks Tobe if he's coming, and Toby agrees to do so. After a Jack scene in the past, we go to another Toby and Kevin scene, smoking their cigars out on the porch. Kevin is going on and on about having the dad bod, or maybe getting a dad bod. Toby's mostly silent as Kevin goes on and on about how he's thinking about what he wants for the kids. Our kids. He means Toby's and Kevin's. And how he wants them to grow up as one big crew. Maybe eventually getting a compound where they could all live together in Malibu. Toby says that he doesn't think he's much for the Malibu scene. And Kevin's like, no? Hey, you're probably right. The kids will probably just end up becoming stoners. And Kevin says that he likes thinking about that stuff, but that's all in the future. Anyway, enough about me. What's going on with your life? How's your job? And that's when Madison interrupts, saying the sushi is ready. Cut to dinner with Beth and crew. Beth's mom says that Bethany has certainly outdone herself. And let me just say this once more. Beth's mom compliments Beth on her cooking. And yet, this somehow barely registers with Beth. She still thinks, in the end, that Beth's mom is just judging her for everything. Now I think this is a good time to talk about an interesting phenomenon. There is something about having our parents around that make us revert. Almost de-age mentally. And in this case, Beth is reverting to her childlike insecurities about her mom judging her. And their relationship was a tough one back in the day. She was against Beth dancing as a youngster. And she is a very tough woman. But watch this episode again and tell me where Beth's mom is even all that bad in this episode. The only thing that I can even recall is one of the first scenes that we see her, where she basically gets the kids to do what Beth couldn't. Or at least not right away. She commanded instant respect and instant power over the kids that Beth simply didn't have at that moment. And I would argue that this really isn't all that bad. For the rest of the episode, where is Beth's mom all that overbearing or judgy? Honestly, she comes off as basically the typical mom, which in itself can be kind of annoying the older you get. Beth asks, "So, how's everybody's day?" And she directs us to Tess. Tess says it's the same as every other day because they're stuck there all the time. She then casts the question to Malik, who gives Randall a look, which is something that Deja definitely picks up on. And I think there's a little bit of Randall that kind of likes being in this little conspiratorial thing with Malik. Malik nervously responds, same old, same old. Randall then cuts him off, saying rather loudly that he has something to say. His basil plant seems to be thriving. And as he talks, the girls start taking out their phones, Annie and Tess. And this causes Beth to take the phones away, after Beth's mother comments on how, as a teacher, she takes all the phones and makes them stay in the lockers. She takes the phone from Malik and Randall as well. Randall puts up a mild objection saying that he's a councilman. And then he's like, whatever, the city burns, it burns. What does that matter? We cut back to Kate, Toby, Madison, and Kevin. Madison announces that Natasha, the babysitter, or rather the nanny, has all 4 kids asleep. And apparently, the baby, Nick, vomited in Madison's ear. She has swimmer's ear from it. Well, that sounds a bit uncomfortable. They sure don't include that in the parents' brochure. And Kate says, wow, spoken like a true mom. And Madison says, I can't believe we're both moms. And Kate's all like, I know. And they give each other a hug. This is going to sound awkward, Kate says. But thank you for sleeping with my brother. And we hear a mild snorting reaction from Kevin. And Kate says, thank you for inviting us. And they all sit down to eat their sushi. Kate remarks that Kevin bought enough sushi to feed an army. And Kevin says, yeah, I figured we all deserved a treat. And Kate says, it's so nice. And Kevin says, oh, come on, anything for you guys. Always. Madison proposes a toast, and everybody agrees. To the first get-together of the new generation. May they one day care about each other the way I do about each of you. Aww. Madison realizes she's leaking and has to go change. Kate remarks that the twins have been quiet all night. And Kevin says, yep, it's pretty much the snoo, which is not something I ever heard of. Kate says that they rented a snoo last time, but this time they are going old school. And then Kevin decides to order one up for them, which increases Toby's agitation. Toby is quietly marinating in frustration over the fact that he didn't get the job, and anxiety about the fact that he's eventually going to have to tell Kate, and feeling like a failure, because we must not forget that Toby has depression, and thus he reacts differently to the situation than perhaps the average person. He feels it a little bit more deeply. He takes it as a sign of being a failure, of being inadequate, of not being able to provide for his family, which also goes to the notion of the man as the breadwinner, which even though we have changed in our society, this notion carries on. Kevin ordering up the snoo is just a little bit of gas in that fire. For Kevin, it's just a nice gesture, a way of showing his love, just like the sushi dinner. And he has yet to get the couple a gift for the kids. Toby is reading this much differently, though. And a little bit of annoyance from Toby pops out. He tells Kate, or asks her rather, you told him, didn't you? You told him that I lost my job, and this is actually news to Kevin. And Kevin quietly says, you lost your job? And Kate responds, yes, but he just got a new one. But nope. Toby says as much, that he did not in fact get the job, that they went another direction. And so, Toby is going to eat as much sushi as he can, because it's going to be eating canned dinners for a while. Madison has either really great timing or really bad timing, depending on your perspective. She comes in wearing sweats and says, the entire country is wearing sweats, so why shouldn't I? What did I miss? Oh, this is going to be awkward. And we go to commercials. When we come back, we have a Jack scene, which I'm not going to talk about. So, after that, we are back with Toby and the gang. Kevin is saying that the company that did not hire him are fools. But obviously now is a really tough and weird time. And these things eventually have a way of working themselves out. Dinner continues, the baby comes out for Madison to feed and goes away. And Kevin says that, if there's anything that they need in the meantime to tide them over Kevin is more than happy to help. Kate recommends that maybe she should go back to work, and Toby doesn't think that's a good idea. Either way, Toby would still have to get a job, and they would need childcare, which Kevin once again volunteers. He says, we can get our nanny to take him, and we'll pay for it and all this, and he's getting all excited about the idea, the kids being together all the time, and he doesn't realize that he's pouring more and more gasoline on the fire. Everything he's saying is out of love. But everything he is saying is only heightening Toby's inadequacy, his feelings of not being good enough, of being a failure, of not being able to provide for his family. Kevin is expressing love and concern. Toby is reading condensation and feels like Kevin is bragging about all the money he has, whereas Kevin is only trying to be reassuring. It's an interesting and well played out conflict between the two. Eventually, Toby's just had enough. He tells Kevin, "Damn it, Kevin, just stop it. I don't need you to pay for my kids' lives." And Kevin responds to this simply saying that he wasn't trying to be disrespectful. He was just really trying to say that he can help. He's got enough money where he can help. We're a family after all. Toby says that, does Kevin realize how condescending he sounds? Making it sound like Toby is doing Kevin a favor, taking his hand out. And he says, "Kevin, I have a career. 20 years experience." By the way, what exactly is this career? I still don't know what Toby's job even is, or was. And Toby says, "I can take care of my own family." And Kevin says, "That's the whole point, to take care of our family. To me, it's all of our money." And Toby says, No. You two are our family, and we," indicating Kate, "our family." And Toby says, "We're a normal family with hand-me-downs and not enough money. And you are family from some alternative universe. Platters of sushi and too much money. And some nanny who does all the hard work and magically brings the babies to Madison when they need feeding." And at this point, Kevin says, "Okay, look, you can come after me, but not Madison. She is doing an amazing job." And Toby says, while rubbing his head, and perhaps realizing that he's gone a little too far with his rant, that he knows she is, and he's sorry. And then they hear a baby crying. And somehow Toby knows magically that this is Haley, and he takes off to take care of her. And by the way, Chrissy Metz doesn't actually say much during this scene and during this rant, but we get a lot of facial acting from her, and she does a pretty good job of expressing embarrassment at Toby's behavior, while also having empathy for him and feeling bad for him. We cut back to Beth having her family dinner, and Beth's mom eats some food and says, "Pretty good. Could have used some more peppers, but other than that, pretty good." And this is kind of hilarious because Beth's mom is the one that said, "Hey, don't put so much pepper in there because not everybody can deal with the heat." But it's a mild comment, and one that Beth takes way too much to heart, which you can see on her face. Randall says, "Well, I think it's delicious." And Malik hears his phone and asks politely if he can get his phone because he knows it's about Janelle. And Beth says, "Yeah, go ahead." And Tess is like, "Oh, well, he can get his phone." And Beth is like, "Well, if you have a baby, then you can get your phone." And Randall responds to that while getting a plate from Beth. "Did you just tell our 13-year-old daughter to get a baby?" And Tess says, "Well, I'm expecting a text from Alex, and I should be able to look at my phone." And Beth says, "I know Alex is your best friend, but you can text her after dinner." And again, Beth made the mistake of saying her and not there, which, of course, Tess gets mad at her for. And as it turns out, Alex is not just her best friend, but they are together, which is news to Beth. And Beth seems surprised. Oh, you mean like a couple? And Beth says she didn't know that. And she asks Randall, did you know that? And Randall says no. Malik gets another text. And Deja asks, why are you getting so many texts from Jennifer? And once again, Randall and Malik have this really serious look that Deja again notices. So Malik tells her, and Deja gets mad that she didn't tell her, but Randall. And Malik says that he was going to do so after dinner, which unfortunately there's no way to prove now. Beth is still caught up in this Alex revelation, and she asks, can I ask how long you guys have been together? And apparently it's been 3 weeks. And Beth again says, I didn't know that. And I think Beth is more bothered by the fact that she doesn't know this rather crucial and big thing that's happening in her daughter's life. And Tess is like, yeah, you keep saying that. And we cut back to Deja and Malik continuing to argue. And Tess says, I knew you would react like this. And understandably, Beth is like, react how? And Beth says, I'm not reacting anyway. I just don't understand why you didn't think you could tell me this. Cross-cutting to Deja and Malik, arguing some more. And eventually getting mad at Randall, who chimes in. To the point where she eventually takes off from the table. And then Tess says, she always does this. I told you, if Mom figured out about me and Alex, she would turn around and make this about herself. Before she, too, storms off from the table. And it's glorious here because Tess is completely misinterpreting her mother, not being fair to her at all, typical as a teenager. And Beth isn't far from doing the exact same thing to her own mother. And now Beth is mad at her mother because Tess apparently told her. And Annie, who is the only one who hasn't stormed off because she doesn't have any problems at all with anybody, is asked by Randall to give them a moment. And Annie takes the moment to basically get use of Randall's tablet out of it. And she says she can take all the time in the world. You know what? I'm really not clear about how old Annie is. We get definitive ages for Deja and Tess. Tess is 13, Deja is 15. And I'm not sure where that puts Annie at. I'm going to go ahead and assume around 10, 11. Because I think she's like at least a couple years younger than Tess, obviously. After everybody's gone, Beth says, so my daughter doesn't think she can talk to me. Well, you can add that to your list. And Beth's mom is pretty confused by this comment. What list? She asks. And Beth responds, the running list of all the things that you think I can't do right. And Beth's mom responds, I'm not doing that. And Beth says, oh, sure you are. The curry isn't spicy enough. We use our phones at the table. I can't control my kids. Well, this is how we are, Mom. We're loud, and our house is chaotic. And the only time I feel self-conscious about it is when you are sitting there judging it all. And it's like, we can't just get back to being us until you are gone. Ouch. And finally, with this little Beth rant, we get to the crux of what her issue is. Beth's mom is understandably hurt by these comments. And she says, I see. And she dabs her lips with a napkin. I guess I'll pack my things. And she takes off from the table. And Beth realizes she just screwed up. What a fantastic scene. 2 back-to-back great scenes. This episode was directed by Ken Olin, the executive producer of this series, or one of them rather, and he does a marvelous job with these 2 scenes. Painfully realistic. We cut to Kate entering the scene with Kevin. And Kate says he's just been going through a lot. Losing his job was a real body blow. And Kevin says, no, he gets it. He understands. It's just money. It's the worst. When we were growing up, I never even thought of money. And Kevin mentions the fact that their dad was no CEO, but he somehow managed to make it work. And Kevin tells her that he needs her to promise him something. And Kate asks what? And Kevin says, if you need help, if you need anything for the kids, you let me know. What's mine is yours. And Kate begins to object. And then Kevin more firmly says, what's mine is yours. You know, I've been doing the rewatch videos of season 1, and comparing Kevin's character in season 1, especially where I'm at now, to Kevin now, it's a stark contrast. Toby comes in quietly and says that both the kids are in a good spot to transfer to the car, and he thinks that they should seize the opportunity. And Kate says, okay, I'm going to go get Jack, and she exits the scene. Toby takes the opportunity to say that he's sorry about earlier, that wasn't about him. And Kevin says that he's sorry too. And Kevin asks, are we okay? Because I just got finished not talking to one brother. I don't think I could take it doing it to another. And Toby says, oh yeah, this isn't an epic Pearson battle. This is more like a sushi skirmish. And Toby throughout the scene looks suitably embarrassed by his own behavior. There were some fans who were critical of Toby's behavior, and it's not his finest hour here. But he recognizes that himself, and he apologizes. For me, that's the end of it. We all have our weak moments. We all have our moments where we're not proud of our own behavior. But it wasn't that big of a deal. And in the end, he recognized that his behavior was out of line, and he apologized for it. That's it. Cut to a lovely Deja and Randall scene. Deja is hiding out in Randall's spot that he's claimed. And he says, you found my spot. And Deja's all like, you think you're the only one who knew about this spot? When people are bugging him? Who do you think brought the candles out? And Randall says, I'm really sorry you got upset with my talk with Malik. That's an apology? That's kind of like a backhanded apology. And Deja says, of course I'm upset. My boyfriend's ex is coming back into the picture. They had feelings for each other once. Maybe they'll end up having it again. Randall silently smiles, and when Deja asks why, Randall says, you act so mature that sometimes I forget that you're a 15-year-old girl who's in love for the first time. And Deja says, that's why I'm mad at Malik, not why I'm mad at you. Deja starts to explain that before she came into the family, she never had anybody that was completely in her corner. But then you came along. You're my day one. I'm happy that you have a thing with Malik, but you're always supposed to be in my corner. You're supposed to think of me first. And Randall says, I am your day one, and I promise you that I will always be Team Deja. First and always. And after a long beat, Randall asks, do you want to go through Jennifer's Instagram and trash her? And Deja's all like, well, what do you think I've been doing out here all this time? Randall looks all at the pictures and is all like, what? Jennifer, girl, what are you doing? Duck face with the filter? I don't think so, Jennifer. And Deja laughs. Like I said, absolutely lovely scene between the two. Cut to Beth's mom packing. Beth enters the scene with a knock and says, I shouldn't have raised my voice. That was disrespectful. Beth's mom cuts to the chase. You really think I'm judging you? And Beth says, at every turn, Mom. And Beth's mom says, you're right. I am judgmental about some things. Napkins on the table, or napkins on laps, coats not hung up. That's the small things. But the big things? The big mess, as you call it? I'm envious of that. Beth seems rather stunned by that comment. Beth's mom goes on to say, you know what it's like in my house these days? Quiet. So very quiet that I've learned to tell the time not by the quiet, or rather by the clock, but by the sounds of traffic. The sound of other people going about their full and loud lives. There are no surprises in my house. No arguments. No loud men talking about their basil plants. That's why I like being here. This right here is an example of why I absolutely adore this series. It has a way of changing the perceived problem and flipping it on its head, and doing so in an effective and emotional way. Gets me every damn time. We cut to a scene of Kate calling her mother to thank her. And Kate is like, thank me for what? And it was for making it so that they never even noticed that they didn't really have a whole lot of money. With the homemade costumes, so on and so forth. Kate genuinely doesn't know how she did it, nor if she could do it herself. But Rebecca already points out all the things that Kate has already done, that she is fully capable. And if she ever doubts that, just look at what she has already accomplished. Again, watch the first season and compare the relationship to what it is now, and it is a very stark contrast. The series has done a great job, all in all I would say, of progressing the characters and making it seem as they've grown, because they have. Kate goes to Toby and tells him that he is a great father. He's a great provider. She's going to accept the position that she was offered at Jack's school. And Toby quietly accepts this. We cut to Randall on the patio porch. Beth comes out with a cooler and asks, what's this about? And Beth responds, well, my mom is now staying indefinitely. Your entire family treats this place like the Ramada Inn. Now it's my turn. And Randall, if he is wise, will never object to this, because she's absolutely right. We had Kevin sleeping there forever without Beth having a say, and we had William coming to stay there without ever consulting Beth about it before doing it. So Randall, it is definitely time to keep your mouth shut and just accept this. Take the L. And I absolutely love, given how this episode begins, that this is the decision that Beth ultimately makes after talking to her mom. And realizing what it comes down to is that her mom is an elderly, lonely woman who really just wants to be a part of the family. We have our final scene with Kevin and Madison, who's kind of being eaten a little bit by Toby's words in a way. Madison tells him that he was just upset. But Kevin points out, where are they wrong? And he realizes that they're never going to have that big complex where they all live together. And this concept of needing to have all these people together kind of plays in a little bit to Kevin's. Kevin says that he is just going to have to get used to just being the two of them. And he's happy with that. But just then, they hear the door. Toby goes to investigate. And who does it turn out to be but Uncle Nicky? Kevin looks stunned, and so am I. And inside, I'm doing a little happy dance. Nicky says, let me get this straight. You only named one of your babies after your favorite uncle? And Kevin begins to smile. The episode fades out. Well, like I said, that was an absolutely fabulous episode. I think I might be in the minority of liking it this much. There's definitely people who like the episode, but I really completely adore it. And I am overjoyed to see Nicky again here. One of my nagging concerns is that we really need to bring Nicky back into the story, because he's eventually going to be at Rebecca's bedside, and we have to explain how that happens exactly. So all in all, I'm pretty pleased with this episode. If you like this video and my content in general and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can join my Core Productions Facebook group. You can join my This Is Us discussion page, also on Facebook. You can buy something at the Corman Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as myself. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to my channel. This is Dave from Corman Productions, signing off.